Welcome, everyone. I'm Ted Sarvata, and I'm here with my colleague, Keyne Petkovic, Assured Strategy Coaches, and we are so happy to share with you unlocking your business's cash potential. Say hi, Keyne.
Hi, welcome everybody.
All right, so cash is one of those things that is super, super important, and a lot of people get afraid of it. So we're going to have a great time today, and we're going to share some information. And you have questions afterwards, please get in touch with us. You can certainly use the chat to ask questions during the presentation, and we're happy to talk with you. You will not interrupt us. You will not throw us off our game. Ask at any point. All right, so the big takeaway for today that we are going to leave you with is 3 tools to improve your cash position. All right, so that's what you can count on us for today. And we're going to talk about those tools at some depth. Obviously, we can't talk at great depth in an hour, but we will talk at some depth. And if you want to go deeper, please get in touch, as I said, and we're happy to share with you. All right, so let's give a little background. How did we get here? So Assured Strategy is a coaching firm in North America, and we focus on the work of Vern Harnish. We began our firm when Vern only had one book, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits. And that book inspired our founder, David Chavez, so much in his own CPA firm that he tripled his valuation just by reading and implementing tactics from this book. He joined the coaching organization in 2009, and 6 months later, I joined. And so, and Keyne joined David and the firm before I joined the firm. So David and I were both coaches. Keyne joined the firm. I eventually joined the firm. And now we're a dozen people. We're all over the United States, and we serve mid-sized growing businesses. So then the next thing that happened is Vern wrote Scaling Up, which was the next iteration. It was Rockefeller Habits 2.0. The whole idea of Vern's work is to take what he learned as a child of an entrepreneur, that bad things happened to his dad as an entrepreneur, and he wanted no entrepreneur to ever go through that again, and no entrepreneur's family to ever go through that again. He wanted to give simple, actionable tools to entrepreneurs so that they could grow their businesses, and that's where Scaling Up comes from, and that's the basis of our work here at Assured Strategy. So then he rewrote Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and updated it for the 20th anniversary edition. And it just got so much better. Scaling Up is a little bit like a textbook. For those that aren't deeply in this work, it can be a little bit difficult to read. It's totally worth reading, but if you're going to start with a book, you actually should start with Vern's newest book, which just came out in the last few months, Start to Scale. So Start to Scale, as we all know, the further in we get into our career, the more we know about what we didn't know before. And so taking what he didn't know when he wrote Mastering the Rockefeller Habits and what he didn't know when he wrote Scaling Up, Start to Scale is really the beginning point for most people. So if you haven't read any of these books, I highly recommend reading Start to Scale. And at that point, get in touch with us. And we're happy to talk with you about what assistance you might need from outside your firm, or at least to give you some guidance in terms of your do-it-yourself approach. A lot of people around the world have done a do-it-yourself approach, and then they find that having a coach just accelerates the process. So just keep that in mind as you're beginning your journey. Inside Scaling Up and inside Start to Scale is these 4 decisions: people, strategy, execution, and cash. I want to just give a brief overview of each one before we dive into the specific content of today's work. People is how you get everything done. So you want to ask yourself the question, do I have the right people? Are they in the right seats? And are they doing the right things right? Now, the last question might be an execution question, frankly, but do I have the right people in the right seats doing the right things are your people questions. That's where you want to make sure. We talk about Jim Collins, how he says we got to get the right people on the bus first before we even decide where the bus is going. Now, in your case, you may know where the bus is going, so you're in a little bit of a paradox. Do you have the right people on your bus? You have to ask yourself that. Would I enthusiastically rehire everyone on my team? Today, we're not going to talk about people, but I just want to give you a little background and overview of where we start. Strategy is, how are you different in the marketplace? How are you different from your competitors? Strategy is how you grow your top line. When we talk about growing a business, you grow your top line because you have your strategy where it should be. If your top line is not growing the way you want it to, you need to look at strategy questions. We have quite a few webinars on strategy topics and quite a few blog posts on our website. So please search for those or just let us know if something that you're interested in. We're happy to guide you to find that content. Execution is how you take that revenue, that growth, and you turn it into profit. If you are growing revenue, but you're not growing profit, you have an execution problem. We talk about economies of scale, right? We should be more efficient as we get bigger, but a lot of mid-sized businesses find they go the opposite direction. They find that things get more cumbersome, they get harder. We are going to touch on execution today, even though today is a cash webinar. A lot of our cash tactics come from the world of execution. So we'll talk about both. And cash, of course, one of my favorite Vern Harnish quotes is, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash is king. Cash is king. All right, and we'll talk more about that as we go. But it is very possible for you to be growing profitably and still go bankrupt if you're not paying attention to your cash. So if that paradox doesn't make sense to you, definitely get in touch and we'll talk about that further. But the idea there is, if you're growing, you're going to need to grow your inventory. You're going to need to grow your staff. You're going to need to grow your marketing. You're going to need to grow all these things that are not revenue generators on day one. You have to pay that money first before the cash comes back. And we'll get to that when we get to the cash conversion cycle. All right. Anything to add in overview, Kane, before we start diving in?
No, I'm excited for us to share some of those tools that can help them find some cash.
All right. Very good. So where we're going to go first is we're going to go into execution. The question that we ask in execution is, are all your processes running without drama and driving industry-leading profitability? Processes are in the world of execution. Drama typically comes from the world of people. And profitability, we talk about that in our cash realm. You can be profitable and still have cash go in the wrong direction, but profitability is absolutely essential to drive cash in the right direction. So I want you to ask yourself this question. Are your processes running without drama, and are they driving industry-leading profitability? Just ask yourself that rhetorical question and see what you think. All right, Kane, first tool, over to you.
Thanks, Ted. So everyone, hi, Keyne Petkovic. My role in the firm is as partner and obviously to work a lot with the clients in different types of services that we have, primarily in leadership training and working with the middle leaders or those that are below the executive strata in trying to be able to empower teams to execute to the strategic decisions of the organization. And part of what we like to do in this particular webinar is talk about how we have had exercises with different employees within a company to help find cash. Because oftentimes when we are looking for opportunities to increase efficiency and then obviously to gain in profitability, executives will sit around a boardroom and think about the ideas themselves, but in fact, it's the folks who are doing the work and who are closest to the work themselves that sometimes have the best ideas to generate opportunities to find cash and to minimize waste. So the first tool that we want to introduce today is called the typical waste tool. There are 6 typical wastes that a company can look at when they're trying to find opportunities to improve efficiencies of some kind or another. So when we're using this tool, it's an exercise that we'll do where we will have individuals in a room or collectively go through and answer their perception of where they think the company falls on these 6 different scales. The first scale is going to be looking at the quality delivered to the customer versus defects. So we would ask ourselves on a scale of 0 defects, or if we have 100% quality, where are we finding, what percent defects are we finding that we have compared to the percent quality for the organization? And this is just based upon perception. You don't need to have actual data generating this. You want everyone in the room to have an opinion based upon their gut perception from the lens in which they're there in their role of what they think the percent might be on this question. And then they would rank that and give a statement as to why they think they scored it the way that they did. And the why is important because it'll come up later in another activity that we'll talk to you about, the cash conversion cycle. The why answer on this particular exercise will help people think about the answers on an upcoming tool. Then the next question is around delays. So how much time are we waiting in an organization versus how much time do we have no delays? And again, the percent of this is an area where people can think subjectively, what's my gut telling me, and put why they answered it in the way that they did. Then the third type of waste is going to be around the right people in the right seats. And this is what Ted referred to earlier. Versus the opposite side of that is what percent of our talent are we potentially underutilizing? Oftentimes in a company, we actually don't know what our full capabilities of our staff might be. And our staff have a perception that they are being underutilized, right? So there's a variety of reasons why that might, come up, but each person's individual perception on how, as a collective, do they think the company is doing in utilizing the staff around them versus not, will give them an indication. Or are people in the right roles for the competency and the skill set and the expertise that they have? So again, subjective percent, but they would score that. Then we have control of production versus overproduction. If we are overproducing, that's an area of waste, right? So how long are things sitting on a shelf? Do we throw things away because we never used it? So oftentimes, the staff in a company, or the middle leaders, or really anyone below that executive strata, that top leadership strata, they have perception of waste, and they have an idea of what's happening regarding the overproduction of potential inventory items. Now, if you're not in a line of work that has, a product, maybe you're in a service line of work. In this area, it could be something regarding, do you have, too much service availability and it's being underutilized? Now we have optimized process flow versus excessive movement. Oftentimes flow charting, where we're looking at, do things move through the system in an efficient way, or are there, areas or steps along the way that have an area of waste? So are we maximizing the efficiency of our workflows? Okay. And then we have value to deliverables versus over processing or no value. So oftentimes in companies, we actually are doing activities in our organization because we, the company, think that it's important. But in fact, our customer doesn't have any value for that activity, or doesn't even know that that activity exists. And when we look at our workflows through the lens of our customer, is the things that we're doing adding value to their experience of the touch points within our organization, or adding value for what we have to do behind the scenes to be able to provide that optimal service or product to them? Or is it things that are going on in our company that really don't provide any value? So again, perceptions around where an employee or a middle leader might think a company sits here, and then the why. And when this activity happens with a group of individuals, we end up finding a ton of ideas for how we can potentially improve the organization. And so we're going to use these ideas for another activity later as it relates to the cash conversion cycle tool. But this primes the pump of the thinking that staff can begin to do in preparation of writing down and brainstorming very concrete, actionable items that might improve cash and might improve efficiency in an organization. All right, so we'll leave it there for right now. But when we did this activity recently with one of our clients, there was 35 people in the room, everywhere from executives to middle leaders. And through that brainstorm, that activity, we were able to find that the ideas that the people who were closer to the real work had were different than the ideas the executives had come up with. And so you really want to get the power of the collective mind when doing some of these brainstormed activities. So I'll turn it back to you here, Ted, but hopefully I've given a little teaser for an exercise that's coming up down the road here.
All right, very good. Thanks, Kane. So as we said, we're going to shift now from execution into cash, and obviously these things overlap. You can't say that creating more efficiency is only in the world of execution, because creating more efficiency also leads to better cash flow. So we're going to talk about some of those crossovers, and there's a reason why we start with the execution tools in this cash webinar, because these things are all connected. All right, so remember, as we talked about cash, we really need to keep in mind, revenue is vanity, profit is sanity, but cash flow is king. Right? So what are we talking about in the world of cash? I want to think about this triangle where it's almost like a three-legged stool. You have to have all three legs for your company to be healthy. You need growth in order to drive increased profitability. When you have increased profitability, that should be driving liquidity, which is cash, right? If you're not generating more cash from your profitability, then there's something going wrong in your system. If your cash isn't increasing over time, then you are creating less freedom for yourself. If you don't have a sufficient amount of cash, then you can't take advantage of opportunities that come up, right? The more cash you have, the more you are able to then invest in growth. And that investment could look like all kinds of different things. That could look like an organic investment in more staff or another location or more salespeople or more capacity for your product or your service. It could look like buying another company. It could look buying a competitor. It could be buying somebody in an adjacent industry or sometimes you might buy a customer or you might buy a supplier. So you need to have that liquidity in order to drive more growth. And then you go around, right? So you have to have all three. If any of the three aren't healthy, the cycle doesn't work, right? If you don't have enough liquidity, you're going to have a real hard time growing. And if you're not growing, how on earth are you going to improve profitability, right? It's very difficult from a stagnant growth perspective to increase profitability, at least on a sustainable level. And then increasing profitability has to be driving more cash. Otherwise you're just stuck, all right? So now we're ready to get to our next concept, and we're going to get into the tool in just a minute. So first I want to talk about the concept, and then Keyne's going to introduce us to the exercise. The concept of the cash conversion cycle is a concept that a lot of business leaders are at least tangentially aware of, but I want us to get into a little bit of the detail here about what is the cash conversion cycle. So in essence, if you just abstract it out to the highest level of cash conversion cycle, what is it? The cash conversion cycle is the number of days, the amount of time from the time you spend $1 to the time that dollar comes back to you with profit, right? So if your business is at 20% profitability, from the time you spend $1, when do you get $1.20 back? That's the cash conversion cycle. Everything that happens in between is the details, and we're going to get into that in the exercise, and we'll talk about it in just a minute, all these different cycles. Right? So typical business, the sales cycle is what begins the cash conversion cycle. What do we mean by the sales cycle? From the time you spend your first marketing dollar, right? If you're doing any kind of advertising or you're doing trade shows or you're sending your salespeople out doing cold calls or out in the field, whatever it is, you're spending money to begin your sales cycle. A lot of mid-market businesses that we work with, they've got sales cycles that could be a month if they're very quick, right? It could be 3 months. It could be 6 months. We have clients where their sales cycle typically is 18 months because of whatever's going on in their industry. It's not good or bad to take your cash conversion cycle number and compare it to some other business unrelated to you. It's not about that. It's about understanding your own cycle. So I want you to think about that for you. What does your sales cycle look like? When do you spend your first dollar? And then what ends the cash conversion cycle, the sales cycle? Typically, it'll be when you get a contract. When you get a contract with a new customer or an existing customer, that ends the sales cycle. For a lot of businesses, they are producing inventory before the sales cycle is over. For some businesses, they're just producing to stock because they know they sell a typical product. For some businesses, once a sales opportunity has gotten to maybe the 70% level, then they start to build toward that contract because they're already anticipating that they're going to be able to sign that. So the make production cycle for those of you in a manufacturing type business, if you have a product, it might not start until the sales cycle is over, right? So don't worry about how they're overlapped. In your business, that might be arranged in a different way. If you're in a service business, you might have a make production inventory cycle, which is about your work in progress. If you have work in progress that you're paying your people to do, but you haven't been paid yet from your customer, well, then that is part of your cash conversion cycle. Or it could overlap, right, where your customers are paying in advance. And so sometimes cycle D, the billing and payment cycle, happens earlier. If you're collecting money in advance, that is a massive improvement to a cash conversion cycle than it is if you're net 30 or net 60, or you're dealing with a very big company and you're net 90, and then sometimes they're late. You become the bank for your customers in those kinds of situations. So we want to avoid that. And we'll get into that in a few minutes. Right now, I don't want you to judge anything about your cycles. I just want you to understand what are our cycles in our business. The delivery cycle in the middle here, sometimes all the delivery cycle is handing it over to a carrier and they're taking it to the customer. And then in a day or two, it's there. And you're invoicing once it leaves your shipping dock, right? It could look like that. Your delivery cycle could look different, though. It could be that you have installers that have to go to the customer's site, and your delivery cycle could take a month to get that all scheduled and to get spare parts and whatever you need, right? If you haven't gotten all your ducks in the row, your delivery cycle could be very long. So I want you to be very honest with yourself. What is our delivery cycle? In a service business, delivery cycle could be the time that you spend delivering whatever that intangible service is. So you just want to think about what are the various cycles in your business. And then from the very time you spend $1 to the time $1 and profit comes back to you, that is the total of your cash conversion cycle. And typically that's measured in days. All right, Keyne, you ready to share with us the tool of how we actually get into some of the details here?
Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, we use the waste tool to prime the pump of the staff's thinking regarding potential areas of waste. Because when they're trying to apply an initial brainstorm and get their mindset into the business and the different areas in which waste can be found, then that thinking gets applied into some specific ideas for how they can improve the cash conversion within the organization. And so what ends up happening is, when you think about this first section as an example, right, ways to improve your sales cycle, then folks would look back through that waste tool and look for the ideas that might relate to something in the sales cycle area. And that's where they would put down any specifics that they could think of that were generated from their ideas around waste. And so then they're marking, is this going to shorten the cycle time, or is this going to eliminate mistakes? So that's how that waste tool also works with the cash conversion cycle quite nicely, because it gets people's thinking to say, is this going to be a reduction of a waste, right? Or is the waste going to actually, like if we fix something that's a delay, for example, it's actually going to shorten a time. So then they can take their general ideas, put down some specifics around it, and then categorize it. Is this going to be a shortened cycle idea, or is this going to be an elimination of a waste idea? We won't get into that third column right now, improving the business model, but that's another area that Ted will talk about in a moment. So anyways, as you're going through these different categories, section A, B, C, and D, everyone is taking their ideas from the waste tool and actually documenting the specific things. And by the end of the exercise, you can have hundreds of ideas that are then categorized and documented, and then that gets brought up and get used at the executive level in one of their retreats or in an offsite or some kind of longer conversation to look at that brainstormed ideas and begin to take out the ones that the executive team really wants to implement or put into practice or do something with, or maybe putting on a parking list for later. But it captures all of the brain power across any employee in the organization, not just senior thinkers, right? But all of the staff. And then it allows the power of everyone's collective brain to be able to support an organization's decision on how they want to improve the cash conversion cycle and find opportunities to minimize waste and increase that profitability and increase cash. So it's an activity, Ted, that, we use quite a bit, as you know, which can really generate great ideas, the power of ideas.
One thing I want to underline about this is you want people to really open their minds to any kind of possibility, and you don't want them closing their minds through evaluation and judgment of the ideas. It is okay to have off-the-wall ideas, and not all the ideas are going to be implemented. Some of the ideas might be bad ideas. That's fine. It doesn't matter, because bad ideas lead to good ideas. One technique that you can use to keep your mind open when you do get into an evaluative place is you can ask yourself the question, what's the 10% of this idea that I actually really like, even if it's a bad idea? And if you ask yourself that question, it is invariable. Your brain will pop with another idea and then share that idea and write it down. So I really just want to reiterate that, when Keyne's talking about generating all these ideas, we do this individually so we don't bias each other and so we don't get into evaluation. I have seen it too many times. We've made the mistake where somebody says, hey, let's brainstorm, and somebody starts writing on the wall right away, and people, somebody will say an idea and then somebody else will start poo-pooing that idea. That is not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is everybody doing their own work first. And literally in 15 minutes, when Keyne talked about hundreds of ideas, you could literally have hundreds of ideas in 15 minutes without the cross-sharing. Now, maybe you only have 100 ideas. Maybe once you start the cross-sharing, then people generate even more new ideas because they think, oh, that's a great idea. Or that's a terrible idea, but it made me think of something else, right? And then you think of another new idea. So let's give a couple of examples. In the billing and payment cycle, there's an example that Vern tells in Scaling Up about a company that changed the way they did their invoicing. They stopped printing on white paper and they started printing on blue paper. Think about what that means. When their accounts receivable people called up the accounts payable people at their customers and they said, hey, we're looking for that invoice. It's the blue one. They have a stack of invoices on their desk. They could look at that and grab the blue one out and then bring it to the top to pay it, just like that, right? That's amazing, right? What a brilliant idea. There are other ideas, like maybe we should hire another accounts receivable clerk. Maybe we just need another person whose full-time job is to just work the phones and to get to know those accounts payable people and our customers. Get to know them as human beings, because there's human beings on the other side. So many times we fall into a trap of thinking about businesses as a monolith. But if you think about them as collections of people, there's an accounts payable person over there. Who are they going to pay first if they have a choice? The person who's nice and sends them a chocolate from time to time, or sends them a nice card or just is nice to them on the phone versus, where the fuck's my money? Rah, 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 right? Do you want to pay that person? No. Passive aggressively? No. These are human beings, right? So I'm just sharing a couple of ideas that have come up over time. That's just on the billing and payment cycle. You can think about, how do you shorten your sales cycle? Maybe your salespeople need to do more research before that first appointment. Or maybe you need to be more focused on your core customer in your marketing so that you have fewer unqualified leads coming in. Maybe there's something you can do in the marketing world that shortens the sales cycle, right? So I'm just giving a couple of ideas, and every business is different, and I don't want to go too deep on any of the specific examples, but I do want to get into improving the business model. Anybody in your company can give brainstorm ideas on all four of these levels of the cash conversion cycle, all four of these cycles, right? The sales cycle, the make, production, inventory cycle, the delivery cycle, or the billing and payment cycle. It's more difficult, though, to call on most people to think about your business cycle, because a lot of people just don't have that kind of training or that kind of mindset to be able to think about that. So often the business model changes are things that are going to be either your middle leaders who are pretty seasoned, or it's going to be your senior team that comes up with these ideas. I am not saying to discount any ideas that come from your front line, not at all. I'm saying the opposite. But this third column of improving your business model really is something that you're going to want some deep thinking from your executives, right? From your higher level leaders. And let's give a couple of examples. So there's an oldie but a goodie example of Dell computers. So back in the day, before people were comfortable really buying things online, right? How did you buy a computer? If you bought a computer from Dell, you placed your order and then it would come in the mail and you haven't paid for it yet, but the post carrier knocks on your door and says, okay, here's your computer. Now hand me a check. Remember this? Some of you are too young to remember this. You don't even know what I'm talking about. This is COD, cash on delivery, where you would hand them a check to the person at the postal carrier. And then what happens? It has to go back to the post office. It has to get mailed back to your business. It takes a long time. And you think about all the inventory, all the money that you spent on building that machine. That's the situation that Dell was in back in the early 90s. And their cash conversion cycle was 63 days from beginning to end, right? And they were in trouble. They needed to raise $20 million or they weren't going to be able to go to the next level in their business. And their new CFO, Tom Meredith, came in and he said, you know what we should do instead? We should change this and we should start having people pay us up front. What we'll do is we'll have a website where people can go and they can configure their own computer. So it's all custom. and we won't build it until they press buy. Now, what's the last thing they do before they press buy? Obviously, we all know this today because in 2025, this is how we do everything. We give them our credit card number. We give them our credit card number up front. That's how all businesses work today. But back then, it was revolutionary. The people would pay for something in advance before they got it. And not only before they got it, before Dell even built it. And so you think about what happened there. Then Dell would build your computer, and they probably had net 60 with their suppliers. And so they totally turned it around. They turned their cash conversion cycle into negative 21 days. They had your cash 21 days before they needed to pay their suppliers. It was a massive change. And so they didn't need to take that $20 million investment. They invested in themselves. Imagine they were going to maybe give away half the company for that $20 million, but they didn't have to give away anything because they generated that cash in-house with a change of business model. When you think about your business model, nothing is going to be as obvious as that because we're looking at hindsight, right? With hindsight, that was the most obvious change in the world. But at the time, it was revolutionary. Think about Costco. Costco takes your cash up front. For those of you that are Costco customers, what do? You can't even go in their warehouse unless you're a member, right? You get there and they check your ID at the door. You have to scan your membership to get in the door to buy from them. That's incredible. And so what do you do instead? You go to the membership counter, you buy a membership. I can't remember what it is now, 65 or 75. It used to be 50. Before that it was 40. Every time they open a new store, they generate enough cash from new memberships to that store to build 2 more stores. Think about that. Think about how impressive that is. If you look at their financials and you look at the entire year of Costco and you look at the profit line at the bottom, the profit line is equal to the amount that they collect in memberships. They break even on everything they sell throughout the year on average. But where do they actually make their profit? From the memberships. So their business model is one that really changed a lot for them. There's a lot more about Costco. We'll talk about it at another time and in other webinars about how they treat their people and everything else. They're an amazing company. But just think about that business model change. All right, so I have one more business model story that I want to tell. And it's actually the opposite side of the Costco situation. It was a company called Wild Birds Unlimited. They sell bird seed and all kinds of other things for homeowners who want to have birds come to their yard. Well, what happens if you're Wild Birds Unlimited and Costco gets into the bird seed market? You can see where I'm going right already, because you know when you go to Costco, those of you that shop at Costco, you know that if you buy bird seed at Costco, you're going to need to buy a 50-pound bag, and you're going to need to carry it out to your car, and you're going to need to somehow get it into your trunk, right? You better be lifting weights, right? You better be working out, or you better get help to get that into your car. And then when you get home, you got to get it out, right? And then what happens? First of all, you buy that Costco 50-pound bag. Why? Because it's a lot cheaper per pound. It's obvious why you buy it. But think about all the problems. You have the problem of the weight. You have the problem of the storage. Where the heck are you going to put that in your garage? You have the problem of creating rodents, right? You're going to get mice in there because you can't seal that bag up and they're going to eat through the bag, or you're going to spill it and you're going to have a mess. You might spill it in your trunk. That's even a bigger mess. At least if you spill it in the garage, you can just sweep it out. But you've got a problem because 50-pound bag is a problem. All right, so Wild Birds Unlimited has a problem because the price per pound at Costco looks a lot better when you're selling 5 and 10-pound bags. So what do? You have to put your thinking cap on and think about, how do we solve this from a business model perspective? What they decided to do was think about, we could solve the storage problem and the mess problem, and we could solve how heavy it is by selling 50-pound quantities, and we provide free storage. Wild Birds Unlimited will sell you 50-pound bag, but it's not a 50-pound bag. They just keep it in a big bin in the back, just like bulk foods at your grocery store. And so you buy 50 pounds and they just write it in the ledger. And then they give you 5 pounds or 10 pounds or whatever you want. And then what happens is you come back every week or 2 weeks, or you come back once a month, and you get cross-selling opportunities. Because do they put that bulk bird seed in the front of the store so you can just get in and out quick? No, they put it in the back of the store. So when you come in, you have to walk through the whole store. And you know what happens, all kinds of impulse purchases and a new bird feeder and a new bird bath and a new toy. for your other pets that, to chase away those birds, or, that's probably opposite. I got my brain going too excited and I got in the wrong direction. But the point is cross-selling opportunities. And so they got their cash up front and they didn't even have to deliver 50 pounds of bird seed. So there was a massive business model change there that was very beneficial for their customers and beneficial for Wild Birds Unlimited. And frankly, Costco can't do it because it doesn't match their way of doing business. So this is, again, back to strategy. How are you different from your competitors? All right. So I want you to think about your business model sort of as a separate exercise. And I really want you to put your brain on those business model changes that you could make, especially the ones that seem like they're crazy or that our industry would never allow it, or that's just not how things are done in this industry. Think about those ones for sure. And if you want to talk them over with us, please reach out. We're happy to talk it over. There's no light switches on the wall where you're just going to change from one business model to the next. So you want to think about this very diligently. All right. Anything else to add on that topic, Kane?
Well, no, the only thing I'm thinking is that there's that story. I don't remember where it was at, where some line staff person figured out that the reason that a bunch of stuff was getting returned was because the printer that printed off the labels needed, new ink or new ribbon or something. And all the executives were trying to figure out, why are they getting all of this, waste coming back with rework from the delivery cycle. And it was the line staff that knew right away, we just needed a new printer and get this thing fixed. And so I think it just reiterates the point that sometimes those closest to the work can have the most profound ideas.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. You want to tell a little bit more about what happened with Sable?
Yeah. So with this particular client, obviously there's several steps to that workshop, but when they did the waste exercise, and then they did the brainstorm individually, to Ted's point, of their ideas around the cash conversion cycle opportunities. And then they shared those with each other, right? That final list was generated, and it was able to create some significant opportunities for the company to evaluate ways of improving their efficiency. And so, sometimes it's just taking a few hours to have a workshop or have a conversation with staff and use a tool, and it can create, long-term profitability or cash or opportunities for efficiency in the organization. It doesn't take a lot to get a lot.
Yep.
Yep. And then just another quote from him that it's really helped their organization find that efficiency opportunity.
Yeah, very good. All right, so our third tool of the day. And by the way, if you want these tools, we are happy to send them to you. Just get in touch with us, and we're happy to send you out these tools. So the Power of One is a tool to think about the 7 levers that can that impact your cash flow. All right, there are 7 levers. Let's zoom in a little bit so we can see these. So price increase is one lever. If you increase prices and hold everything else constant, let's say you don't lose any customers, but you increase prices, well, that's going to have a massive impact on your cash flow. And it's also, in this case, going to have an impact on your profit. Not all of the levers have an impact on profit. 3 of them at the bottom don't have an impact on profit at all. They're profit neutral, but they have an impact on cash flow. So you can think about price increases, and you can think about volume increases, right? A lot of people think about the way that I'm going to improve my cash position is I'm going to sell more. The problem is if your margins are too low, well, there's that old saw, right? I'm losing money on every sale, but I'll make it up with volume. Yeah, haha. It doesn't work, right? Every additional item you sell actually makes your profit worse in that case. So you have to make sure that your profit margins are healthy. Sometimes it's important to actually decrease volume. And one way to decrease volume is to increase prices. Imagine if you were to increase prices today 10% and you were to lose 10% of your customers. You'd have to do your spreadsheet to actually figure out what the impact would be. But when we have done that with our clients, invariably they find their profit goes up and their cash goes up. Because who do you lose? You lose the 10% of your customers that are most price sensitive. And the 90% of your customers that stick around, they're paying that higher price and they're getting more value from you. So you have to make sure that your value proposition is in line, but you want to look at which lever is going to make the most difference. You can reduce your cost of goods, and that will make a massive difference too. If you reduce your cost of goods 1%, that 1% goes to the bottom line, right? Goes straight to the bottom line. Whereas you increase volume 1%, then you're only getting your profit margin as going to the bottom line. If your profit margin is only 10% and you increase volume 1%, you're only getting 0.1% that's dropping to the bottom line. Overhead reduction, right? Anytime you look at your overhead reduction, or if you keep your overhead constant while you're growing, right? That's another way to look at it. That would be a percentage-wise overhead reduction as you're growing. Then you have to do the math, right? And this exercise allows you to get consciousness and do the math on these 7 levers. So the first 4 levers are both impact on profit and cash. And then your reduction in AP, your reduction in inventory, and your increase in AR. No, the other way around. I got my AP and my AR backwards. If you increase your accounts payable days, then that's time when your suppliers are being your bank. We talked earlier about your customer, you being the bank for your customers. Well, that's what happens when you let your accounts receivable grow. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you're driving your accounts receivable down. Now, there's not an infinite number of days you can move there. You can't, depending on how your business model looks, you can't build your business on the back of your suppliers, just like your customers. You don't want your customers to build their business on your back. You don't want to be the bank for your customers. You also don't want to allow your suppliers to be your bank because you want them to be healthy. So if you're at net 30 with all of your suppliers and you're always paying in 15 days, what benefit is that to you? You should be negotiating some kind of discount, or you should be able to get something back for that. Or you should be increasing that back to 30 days, and then you get to keep that cash. And those 15 days are going to make a massive difference for you in terms of your ability to either not borrow from a credit line or to be able to deploy that cash in some other way for those 15 days, right? It'll make a big difference. So the exercise itself on paper sometimes can be a little hard to figure out the math. And so we have a software program that we are happy to share with you. You can buy this software. It's a subscription model. And the idea is you put your financials in, and you can do a basic version of this by putting 6 numbers in over the last 3 years, and it will tell you your story of your business. And then you can just change these numbers. And so you can say, all right, I'm going to increase volume 2%, and I can see that the impact on my profit is $264,000 for this business, right? Their operating profit currently is $2 million. If they increase their volume 2%, the impact is $264,000 on profit and $51,000 on cash. I don't want to get into details here, but look at the difference of reducing COGS by 2%. That has a $981,000 difference in terms of cash flow. This is a company that's only got $843,000 in cash flow to begin with. A 2% COGS can basically double their cash flow in terms of the year. And their profit increased their profit almost 50% just by a 2% reduction in COGS. So you got to pay attention to what does a small change do for you. A small change, a 1% price increase might be the best thing you could possibly do. Think about if a 1% price increase, if you haven't increased prices lately, and maybe you need to do more than 1%, but if you can get away with 1% and your customers won't even notice, boy, you should be doing that right now. And do you have that kind of price power? So you got to pay attention to that. That tells you your strategy is lined up. All right, so anything else on the power of one, Kane?
Yeah, let's just quickly mention that, we often obviously use this tool in retreats with our clients to play with the numbers with the executive team, right? We'll throw out different scenarios and see how it changes things before decisions are actually made that can have long-lasting implementation issues or problems for the organization that someone hasn't anticipated. But one of the times that we did this with a client in Denver, they actually realized that when they put in their different lines of their company, the different service lines, that one of their service lines was losing money. And it had been concealed in the arching results of their profitability and their revenue. But when we actually separated it out and did this by different service lines, they made some pretty significant changes internally to what they were doing, because they realized that other services were carrying this particular type of work. And once they realized that, major decisions had to get made. So sometimes, it's helpful to play with this software, even if you have different types of services, much less your overarching company results. just wanted to mention that too, Ted. That was pretty powerful when you had done that with that client.
Yeah, and the opportunity to take your numbers and put it in a software package that expects the numbers to show up in a certain way means that you also have to clean up your data. So it's a good thing to be able to use an external tool. If you're only using your own spreadsheets, then you can miss some things that you really should be cleaning up. All right, so what are the next steps for you? We have a couple of free offers. We have not talked about DISC at all. That's in the people realm. That's a tool that we use in order for people to gain more self-awareness and to be able to work together as a team. We're happy to offer that for free. But the one I really want to highlight right now is the business valuation. If you go to that QR code, and you can go there right now, you can put in a few numbers and you will get a basic business valuation. And you do not need to be in the market for selling your business in order for a business valuation to be very important for you. If you ever need to borrow money, if you need to potentially buy a company, or if a company tries to buy you, even when you're not selling, you need to know your valuation in order to know what your power is. What power do you have in the marketplace, right? And so you want to be able to look at valuation as one of the key metrics for knowing the health of your business over time. All right, so go ahead and take advantage of those offers. Just to review then, what are we here for today, right? We're here for your big takeaway of 3 tools to improve cash. And that's what we've been talking about this whole hour we've been together. So typical wastes, the cash acceleration cycle, and the power of one are the 3 tools. And we hope you take advantage of all 3 of them. Please feel free to reach out to us and ask for the tools, and we're happy to share them. Anything in takeaway then? Because otherwise I want to invite people to our future events. That's what we're going to do next.
No, I just love how they can go together or they can be used separately. I just think that's an important piece. You don't have to use them all together. So there's different ways that companies can actually implement these tools as they make their business decisions.
That's a great point. And keep in mind, they can be done very quickly. The cash acceleration tool can be done in 15 minutes, and then you're going to have to process all those ideas. But you can generate a lot of ideas very quickly. You do not need to have this be a big time sink in your business. All right, so upcoming events. We have workshops. We have a workshop 2 days in Dallas. You can come to one or come to both. We have Scaling Up, and we have Unlock Your Leadership Potential, which is personal leadership and team productivity. So those are back to back, so that if you're traveling to Dallas, then you can make a week of it if you like, or you can come for one day only. And then we're doing Scaling Up in Boston in May. And then we have 3. Those are all paid events, of course. Our workshops are all-day workshops with 2 of our coaches for each one. And we're super excited to see people face-to-face and spend a whole day getting deeper in concepts. And then we have 3 webinars coming up similar to the format here today. They're free, and we're happy to have you back at any of these. And we'll be offering free tools, a couple in March. And then we have some that we haven't published the dates yet. The July one is happening after that. We'll have more that hit our events page on our website between now and then. So thank you for coming. In conclusion, this is how you can get in touch with us. Feel free to reach out to us for the tools, as we said, or if you just want to have a chat, you want to talk about a situation that's going on in your business, either Kane or I would be happy to spend some time with you, and no cost for that, of course. And we'll see if there's a real resonance and you like what we do. Of course, we'd be happy to explore. But when we sit down for a chat after a webinar, there's no selling. That's not what it's for. It's just to provide you further value and for you to be able to take the next step in your business. And then if you want to talk to us about what we might be able to do as a service for your business, of course, we'd be happy to set up an additional appointment after that. But that's really no obligation, just to talk and see if we can help you by talking through any of these concepts. All right, anything else in conclusion, Kane?
Nope, just have some fun finding cash.
All right, thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to see everybody. See you next time.
Bye.